budgets for leadership development are aimed at mid-management and above because it makes the biggest impact. So that being said, let's look at the mentor mindset. So we've talked about some foundations of mentoring, but look at the mindset involved. And we want to make sure as a mentor, we're cultivating gratitude. We want to be thankful for the relationship. We want to be curious. If we're not curious about our mentee, we're not going to do a good job for them. If we feel like it's a chore and we're not interested, it won't be fun. Joy. Try to show up, try to cultivate a relationship with your mentee that's full of joy. Humility. Guys, your mentees teach you just as much as they teach you, or you teach them, okay? Our mentees are capable of teaching us just as much as we're teaching them, for sure. Humility, okay? We want to be humble. We don't know everything. We don't need to. It's okay. That's fine. Growth mindset. What can I do differently? Where can I improve? How can I do better? And being proactive as opposed to reactive. Proactive is thinking ahead, imagining what their needs are. We're going to go into these in a little more detail. But before we do that, I want to tell you guys a quick story. Okay, you ready? There's a man in a hole, and he's sitting in the hole, and he's uncomfortable, and he's yelling out, help me guys, please help me, man, what do I do? And a doctor comes by, and the doctor hears him, and he's like, man, you're in that hole? He's like, yeah, bro, get me out. What do I do? Please help me. The doctor comes over, he looks down in the hole, and the doctor says, hey, I know what to do, bro. Do this, make this, and do this, and then you can get out of the hole. Good luck, bro. Have a good day. Doctor walks away. So the guy heard what the doctor said. He heard the instructions. He heard the advice, but he's still in the hole. And then the doctor walked away, okay? Next, an engineer comes by, super smart engineer, comes by, and the guy's yelling, hey man, I'm in this hole. Can you help me? And the engineer goes, sure, no problem. Comes over, looks down. Yeah, do this. You can do this, and that, and then you'll get out of the hole. Good luck. I love you. Bye. Engineer walks away. The guy's still in the hole. He's like, okay, well, okay, cool. What do I do? Third person comes by. Here's the man in the hole yelling. Comes over. Doesn't look down. He jumps in the hole with the man yelling. Grabs his hand, gives him a hug, and says, hey, bro, I've been here before. I know what to do. And a lot of times, remember, when mentors first start out, they feel like they got to be the doctor or the engineer. Come by, give the instructions, tell them what to do. Do this, do this. I have to have the best advice, need to have the answers. But the idea is we need to meet them where they are. And we need to meet them with an open heart, an open mind, and compassion. And we need to connect with them and build a relationship and build trust and share our vulnerabilities so they can see or feel that we genuinely care. And so I use the hole analogy because you can imagine if you were in that hole, the person who jumps in there with you gives you a hug and says, I've been here before, I know what to do. That's going to be much more impactful than receiving a bunch of directions or instructions on how to do something. Even if the intentions are good, the doctor had the best intentions, the lawyer or the engineer had the best intentions. But we need to meet our mentees where they are. We need to acknowledge them, validate them, assure them before we challenge them. A lot of times we want to challenge them first. And we want to challenge them because we want them to grow and we want them to get better careers and we want them to learn. But if we're not meeting them where they are and completely understanding their mindset, their emotions, their feelings, their backgrounds, then it's just like the doctor and the engineer example. We're just telling them stuff to do. We're giving them directions. And even if it works, it's not the best combination. When you want to build solid mentor-mentee relations, remember, people don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. That's a really, really important point. Kian's mentor, she knew that she cared about her. And that's the stuff that sticks. It's the smile, it's the emotional component. And so the key here is that so many people miss, and it's not our fault, is we try to mentor from the brain. Logical, analytical, we can do this, do that, drive this outcome, accomplish this goal, obtain this skill, help them this way, drive an outcome. But the reality is we really need to mentor from the heart first, then from the head, and then we can get ideas and results and progress with our mentee. It's by far the most important. Here's an interesting one too. Do you guys have any questions about that, by the way?
Right. I think all of you aspire to be a good mentor. Yeah. And you can go to school and you can study to be a mentor. But I will tell you this, a good mentor comes from the heart. Okay. The heart of really saying a lot of things about the mentee that you are working with. And what are some of the things? And some of the things includes, you see the possible potential of the mentee. The mentee sees themselves as an ice cube, but you see in everyone the possibility of greatness in them, even without them knowing. Okay. And your job is very simple. Your job is just to turn up the heat and let the water melt. And what emerges is the greatness that is inside of each one of the individual. And that's the job of the mentor. And it has to be something that is driven internally and driven the fact that that's your calling. It's you're not paid to do it. It's just basically that's your passion in helping to bring out the greatness in others. So that being a mentor, you need to have that. Yeah, you need to have that. Secondly is there are times you need to help mentees find their way out of their darkness. And I've worked with a lot of mentees that come to me and says, the world that they are living right now is doom and gloom. They feel so helpless, so useless. They feel so down, they feel rejected. And it's our role as mentor, right, to help them to find their way out of the darkness. It's not our job to tell them and point them where is the light at the end of the tunnel. It's for us to help them get very comfortable in that darkness, very comfortable in that total darkness. Imagine that you're in a room that is total darkness and you're being very fearful. The mentor's role is that voice in them to say, hey, I'm with you here. You're not alone in the darkness. Don't worry. I'm going to help you, but you got to find a way out of this darkness. And that is a mentor's job. Very important role. Okay. The other, being a mentor, very interesting is to see that they can do a lot of things. And a lot of people who work in especially in corporate world, they either go from a business development, engineering world, marketing, finance, or even HR. And eventually they don't see that they can do a lot of things besides just the vertical career progression. And so sometimes a mentor role is to help people to discover and says, hey, I can do more things than I didn't realize I can do that. I mean, you guys were sharing about lockdown. Do you know, guys, I have been working at home for the last 15 months. Okay, I have been working at home for the last 15 months. And if you tell me how many times have I gone back to the office, I can tell you it is not more than 20 times. Okay, so you stay at home doesn't mean that it's doom and gloom. You find you begin to start experimenting things, trying to find new ways of doing things. And I will tell you this, I mean, in the last 2-3 months, I started baking cakes and making cookies. Yeah, I'm pretty good at it by now. I'm pretty good in making a lot of cakes, and I'm pretty good in making all kinds of cookies. But life shouldn't end by working at home, and life shouldn't end by not seeing any possibility. So a mentor role is also very important, is to help mentees see there's a lot of possibilities. Now, the other thing is you have to inspire them to discover new solutions. So to be a mentor, okay, How do you inspire people to discover new solutions? You have to be a wild and wacky guy, okay? You have to be a person that is very open-minded. You have to be a person that try all kinds of things. You have to be a person that are fearless to try to make mistakes. When you make mistakes, you just pick yourself up and move on. You have to do that if you want to be a mentor, because all the funny stories that you're going to gain is going to help the mentee that you're coaching. Okay, if you are going.
And most importantly, define ourselves as try and become the modern definition of Formula One. Now, before I got into Formula One, I was in advertising. I was a managing director of an agency in Abu Dhabi, which I set up. I was a managing director of an agency in New York. I'd worked a number of agencies then before I moved to New York. I'd worked and grew up in advertising in London, starting in at Saatchi & Saatchi way back in the early 90s. So you can see why, my history is a blend of, creativity and the business. And I think, or pictures and numbers. And I think it's the mix of those two things, the pictures and the numbers, that are really compelling. So if you go to the next slide, yeah, so this is effectively now a change in the kind of change in what I'm talking about. So now I'm going to move into something which I think is a little bit more instructive or hopefully insightful for you guys. And I wanted to talk about leadership in the general sense, but also specifically how things that I've experienced across my career. Give you 3 specific examples. And in order to do that, I've done it via a really interesting book, which, as I said to you before, I recommend that you read. It's a book by a guy called Jordan B. Peterson. He is a clinical psychologist. He's a professor of psychology. You may have heard of him. He has a massive media profile. He has seminars, conferences, which are always packed out. And he's somewhat of a provocateur. He has, provocative thoughts. And he's very engaging as a result from a media perspective. But he's written this book, and if you go to the next slide, the book is really interesting because he is exploring the line between chaos and order, which is what I spoke about earlier when I talked about rocking boats. And I think it's really important, that line is really interesting for me. And I think it's really irrelevant when it comes to the subject of leadership. So, I mentioned before, but, too much order is not good and too much chaos is not good. So you want to make sure you try and find the line. And I think what good leaders do is they maintain that, they maintain that line between order and chaos so that you see growth, you see transformation, you see exploration. And it's not just a stable, stable, becalmed business. He has these 12 rules, which I'm not going to go through in detail, but what I will do is I will take the top 3 because I think they're probably the most relevant for today, but also given the time that we have. And the 3 I want to talk about is 1, he has these basic rules and they feel very folksy, but I think it's worth delving into them in more detail. Number 1, stand up straight with your shoulders back. 2, treat yourself like someone you are responsible for helping. 3, make friends and people who want the best for you. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through what he says about these 3 areas within each of these 3 rules, and then I'm going to apply it to an aspect of my journey, if you like, or my story. Some practical references to my career. So if you go to the first, slide. So I call this the lobster chapter. So his rule number 1 sounds really easy. Stand up straight with your shoulders back. But what's interesting here is that effectively he's talking about the dominance hierarchy. And the dominance hierarchy obviously reflects to the top-down traditional sense of leadership, but how dominance plays out. And of course, clearly dominance and dominance hierarchy are still very relevant for us today. Now he comes at the dominance hierarchy via lobsters. And he talks about lobsters because I think a couple of reasons. 1, lobsters have been around a long time. They've been around 350 million years. If you think, 65 million years ago, we still had dinosaurs. So lobsters have been around for a long time. They would, I guess, be considered, successful from an evolutionary perspective. And also because they have very simple brains, so they're easy to analyze and they're easy to transfer and transfer understanding across to human brains. But the key thing here is that when he talks about lobsters, he's saying how lobsters are obsessed with status and position, because that's really about their survival. So it's really, the dominant hierarchy is really important to survival. And who has the shelter, who has the breeding rights and so on is really, really hard fought. So that there is lobsters are obsessed with status and position, of course, and so are human beings. But what he goes on to develop the neurochemistry of defeat and victory. And what's interesting is that you see that a lobster loser's brain chemistry differs importantly from a winning